This is the first week of the new message series. This one is titled Living with Power. After the journey of the last 4 weeks where I shared how I came to set the scene for naming our vision, I'd like to take a next step, which is how do we seek to move the vision from just being words into some kind of lived reality. We originally planned a gathering for last December, but cancelled it due to bad weather. We rescheduled the gathering for early March. And at that meeting, I shared some thoughts about how my gifts and skills, with a group of people, about 35 in fact, who had done the Working Genius assessment. And the aim of the exercise was to invite those participating to process how they could use their gifts and talents for the good of the parish. Before you start to think that people weren't, people are and do use their gifts and talents wonderfully for our parish. But this was an assessment that actually asked people for their particular geniuses, the things that they were really good at, so that they might actually be able to support me in the areas that I haven't got the skills that are really necessary. The reason I do that is because I need people to gently push me. Because I'm a gunner. I'm going to do things, but the most likely happen is it's not going to happen. So I need others to just gently push me in that direction. As we listen to that first reading today from the book of Exodus, we hear God address Moses and telling him, "Say this to the people of the house of Jacob, declare this to the sons of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did with the Egyptians, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." God is not a gunner. When God says he is going to do something for his people, he does it, and he does it with an abundance of love. We saw that last weekend when we heard how the people of Israel needed food and water in the desert, and God provided the manna and the water at Meribah so that they would be protected and looked after. But God then goes on to tell Moses, he says, "From this you know that now, if you obey my voice and hold fast to my covenant, you of all the nations will be my very own, for all the earth is mine." And then he tells him, "I will count you a kingdom of priests, a consecrated nation." Let's just remember that phrase, a kingdom of priests, consecrated nation. And this is how God cares for his people. We see this a little bit more clearly when we listen to the reading from the letter to the Romans, where Paul tells us we were still helpless when at his appointed time Christ died for sinful people. But one of the challenges for us who are sinners, even though we've been forgiven, is that many of us actually doubt what that forgiveness means. Do we really accept that God has forgiven you? Or do you think he's still going to remember what I've done? Most of us, I think, have this hope that we've been forgiven. But there's still something, a lingering doubt in our minds that says, am I really forgiven? Because Paul then goes on further and he says, we are filled with joyful trust in God through Christ, through whom we have already gained our reconciliation. But I wonder how many of us really walk around in joyful trust because we've been forgiven. Throughout the Gospels, Jesus constantly says to people, do not be afraid. Listening to Father Callaghan on the Journey Catholic Radio this weekend, and he was saying most of us have this little bit of a fear that sits in our hearts that we constantly trying to overcome. God doesn't want us to fear. God wants us to know that we are a chosen race, a royal priesthood. We are a blessed community because God does work in our midst And God does make his message known through the wonderful people who are part of our story. Most of the times, as I've said before, and I recognise in people's faces when I talk about being a missionary disciple, people say, but that's not me. My friend Father Nicholas Amato, as I mentioned a few weeks ago, gave us 5 points that are really easy for us to live as disciples. To do whatever job you're doing well. To do good deeds for others. To have a sign or something that witnesses to the fact that you're a Christian. To have a simple statement that you can express to somebody if they ask you why you are a Christ follower. Not something you've got to stumble over as you think about it at the time, but something you can say, something that speaks from who you are about your belief. And finally, if somebody comes and tells you that they're sick or somebody one of their families in need, to pray for them. We do that at the beginning of every Mass. And during the prayers of intercession, we have the opportunity to pray for that need. We can do it. It is a simple process if you take it in little steps. It's when somebody uses those magic words, missionary disciples, we all go into this kind of thing, but that's not me. Because I'd like to even go further today. As we come back to Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is now coming into a section of the Gospel that the Jerusalem Bible calls the instruction of the apostles. It starts with a very real part of who Jesus was. Jesus saw the crowds and he felt sorry for them because they were harassed and dejected like sheep without a shepherd. Something had happened, and the religious leaders, the people who should have been caring for them, were not caring for them. And they were looking for answers, looking for some direction, somewhere where they could be at peace and know some kind of support. But then Jesus goes on to say something, and I suspect that this is probably the prayer of just about every bishop in the world. The harvest is rich, but the labourers are few. Send labourers into the harvest. And I suspect that's a decent prayer. But I'd like to change that today. Not the prayer, but where we focus. Because as soon as we say that, I'm sure 99% of people who hear it would think that we need more priests. Let's go back to that passage from the book of Exodus. You are a consecrated nation, a royal priesthood. Every single one of us, by our baptism, have been given the vocation to be a shepherd. And all of you, in some way or other, are shepherds. Pippa may not be, but Heidi is, because Heidi's a big sister. Every single one of us is a parent, a teacher, a guardian, a friend, a supporter of somebody else in our care. And every single one of us has the opportunity to be the support and the encouragement of another in order for them to know what God's love really means. Because when I am witnessing to love, then God is with us. God is very with us. And so when Jesus looks out at the crowd and says that they are without a shepherd, it's because we need to recognise our gift, our vocation, to be a shepherd, a carer of someone else. Because that's what the role of a shepherd is. And we know that Jesus tells us that there is more rejoicing over one sheep that was lost and found than over 99. So if we've only got one to care for, that just means the job's a bit easier, but it's just as real. So I'd like to just hope that we might recognise that God is giving us a gift, an opportunity to be witnesses of his love in the world. Because as we go through these next couple of weeks in this section of Matthew's Gospel, chapter 10, we will hear Jesus speak to his disciples about what they can do. We're told that he gave them authority over unclean spirits with power. Living with power means knowing that God is with us. The power of the Spirit of God's love given to us at baptism is the gift by which we're called to go to others and to make his love known. It's a power that is beyond all our understanding, and all we have to do is unleash it. To let this power come to life in us, so that it might touch the hearts of others. Just remember, the apostles, when Jesus chose them, they weren't theologians. They weren't business leaders. They were ordinary people, fishermen, tax collectors, zealots. They didn't have special gifts, but they were faithful. They were teachable. Although sometimes Jesus got a bit frustrated with them, they were still teaching. They were open to hear what Jesus was saying. So during these weeks, Jesus, by his instructions, is giving the disciples, the apostles now, this opportunity to learn what it means to speak the good news to others and to be a sign of what God's love means. I'd like to hope as we go further and we begin to explore what it means to translate our vision, which is that we are a Catholic, a vibrant Catholic community fed by the Eucharist, empowered by the Spirit, going out to make disciples, that we will see that that's not something which is difficult, because we will see that that's just being Christ-like. It's being, as Jesus talks to us, the ones who witness to his love in the world. And then we'll begin to understand something more of what it means to live generously and graciously to others, our family and friends, as a response to the way God has already loved us.